The 1960s was a time when teenagers lived in a world that seems completely foreign to kids. Today there were rules that don't make sense, strange fads that would never fly now, and social customs that would leave modern teens scratching their heads. If you grew up during this decade, you probably remember these wild facts as just normal everyday life. But looking back now, some of these things were absolutely bizarre. So, let's take a trip down memory lane and explore 20 weird facts about 1960s teenagers that you probably didn't know. Fact 1. Teenagers had their own secret language. If you were a teenager in the 1960s, you probably spoke a language your parents couldn't understand, and that was entirely the point. Teenagers of this era created a vibrant, ever-shifting slang that set them apart from the adult world and made them feel like members of an exclusive club. Calling something groovy or saying that's cool, man, wasn't just a way to express approval. It was a badge of identity, a signal that you were tuned in to the attitudes and rhythms of the younger generation. If something was a gas, it meant it was incredibly fun. If someone was a square, they were hopelessly out of touch with what was happening. And if you told someone to split, you were telling them to take off and leave you alone. Slang in the 1960s evolved at lightning speed. What was cool one year might be passé the next. Teenagers picked up new expressions from their favorite musicians, from drive-in movies, from TV shows, and from each other in school hallways. Parents often had no idea what their kids were saying, which was exactly how teenagers preferred it. Maintaining a private vocabulary helped reinforce the cultural gap between generations, at a time when music, fashion, and social norms were changing faster than ever. But this secret language didn't stop at spoken words. It extended into every aspect of teen life. Young people created their own dress codes: bell-bottom jeans, mini skirts, love beads, and tie-dye shirts. They adopted their own music, from Motown to British invasion rock, blasting from transistor radios and record players. They claimed their own hangout spots too: malt shops, drive-ins, basement rec rooms, anywhere adults didn't dominate. If you grew up during this unforgettable decade, you probably still remember some of those phrases. Little verbal time capsules from a moment when youth culture truly came into its own. Fact 2. Drive-in movie theaters were makeout. Central. Drive-in movie theaters were everywhere in the 1960s. Marketed as wholesome family entertainment, teenagers quickly discovered their real appeal: privacy. While you might watch the movie for the first 15 minutes, the drive-in was mostly a place for couples to make out in relative seclusion. The charm of the drive-in lay in the car itself, a private bubble of independence, yet still public enough that parents couldn't complain too much. Teens would pile into cars with their dates, pay a few dollars, and park in the back row, the infamous passion pits, where serious smooching happened. Parents knew, but the drive-in was more socially acceptable than an isolated spot. At least there were other people around, and theoretically, a movie was being watched. Going to a drive-in was also fun. Blankets, pillows, lawn chairs, and concession stand snacks made it a cozy outing. Intermission reels encouraged visits to the snack bar, adding to the experience. For 1960s teenagers, drive-ins symbolized freedom, a chance to escape parents, share first serious romantic experiences, and join the burgeoning teenage culture that was reshaping America. They were more than movies. They were a rite of passage. Fact 3. Submarine races were a thing. If you heard a teenager in the 1960s talking about going to watch the submarine races, you might think they were actually interested in some kind of naval event. But submarine races was actually code for going somewhere to make out, usually in a parked car near the water. This was one of those inside jokes that all teenagers understood, but that would fly right over the heads of unsuspecting parents. A guy might tell his girlfriend's father that they were going to watch the submarine races, and the dad would just nod, thinking it sounded like a wholesome activity. Meanwhile, the teenagers would be heading to some secluded spot to do anything but watch submarines. The phrase became so popular during this era that it was used in movies and television shows, always with a knowing wink to the teenage audience who understood exactly what it meant. It was part of that secret language that teenagers used to communicate with each other, while keeping their actual activities hidden from adults. Popular submarine race. Watching spots included areas near lakes, rivers, or the ocean anywhere, with water where you could supposedly see submarines, even though everyone knew there weren't any submarines to see. These spots became well known, makeout locations, and on any given weekend night, You'd find dozens of cars parked with their lights off, pretending to watch the non-existent submarine races looking back. Now it seems almost quaint how teenagers had to come up with these elaborate cover stories just to spend time alone with someone they liked. But in the 1960s, when parental supervision was much stricter, these little codes and phrases were an important part of teenage independence. Fact 4. Phone booth stuffing was an actual craze. One of the strangest fads of the 1960s was phone booth stuffing, where teenagers tried to cram as many people as possible into a single phone booth. This wasn't a one-time stunt. It became a nationwide craze and even made it into the Guinness Book of World Records. The challenge was simple. See how many people could physically fit inside. Record attempts drew crowds, and local newspapers often covered the events. Teens all would line up, then twist, turn, and squeeze themselves in like sardines, somehow fitting far more than seemed possible. Some groups claimed over 20 people could fit, though how they did it remains a mystery. The fad's absurdity was part of its appeal. Adults couldn't understand it, making it perfect for teenagers. Competitions took place at schools, drive-ins, and malt shops. Though the craze eventually faded, anyone who was a teen in the early to mid-1960s likely saw or joined a stuffing attempt. The popularity of phone booth stuffing inspired similar stunts, like car stuffing, where teens tried to fit as many friends as possible into a Volkswagen Beetle. Pointless as it seems now, these antics gave teens a way to bond, have fun, and create unforgettable memories. A pure expression of 1960s teenage ingenuity. Fact 5. Panty raids were considered harmless. Fun. One of the most bizarre teenage activities of the 1960s was the panty raid, where groups of male college students would storm female dormitories to steal underwear. These raids were common across campuses and, at the time, often treated as harmless pranks rather than invasions of privacy. Panty raids usually happened late at night. Male students would gather outside dorms, chanting and demanding that female students throw down their underwear. Sometimes the raids escalated, with students entering buildings and rummaging through drawers or laundry rooms. What's shocking today is how they were perceived. Administrators and some female students often saw them as harmless fun. Newspapers covered the raids with an amused tone, and participating students rarely faced serious consequences. Usually only a warning or a slap on the wrist. Some of the largest raids involved hundreds or even thousands of students, creating chaos that sometimes required police intervention. Yet even then, consequences were minimal, and the events were quickly forgotten. If you were in college in the early to mid-1960s, you probably heard about panty raids. They became an odd but expected part of campus life, a ritual that seems outrageous today, but reflected the era's different attitudes toward gender and personal boundaries. Fact 6. Goldfish swallowing competitions were popular. Believe it or not, swallowing live goldfish was a popular stunt among teenagers and college students in the 1960s. Though the fad began in the 1920s, it resurfaced when teens sought outrageous ways to shock their peers. The challenge was exactly what it sounds like. Take a live goldfish and swallow it whole, ideally without chewing. Students competed to see who could swallow the most, with some claiming dozens in a single sitting. Gross, cruel to the fish, and sometimes making participants sick, the stunt didn't deter its popularity. Goldfish swallowing competitions often took place at college parties and even high schools, with spectators cheering record attempts. Successful participants were treated like heroes if they managed to keep the fish down. The craze eventually attracted the attention of animal rights activists and health officials. Swallowing live goldfish posed risks. The fish could carry parasites or diseases, and there were documented cases of people getting sick. Despite the warnings, the fad persisted throughout the 1960s. It wasn't about reason or practicality. It was about daring, boundary pushing, and showing off. Swallowing a live goldfish was a way for teenagers to grab attention, test limits, and partake in one of the era's strangest and grossest stunts. Fact 7. Girls had strict dress codes at school. If you were a teenage girl in the 1960s, school meant following dress codes that seem absurd today. Girls were not allowed to wear pants, period. It didn't matter if it was freezing outside or uncomfortable. You wore a skirt or a dress. Or you didn't come to school. These rules were strictly enforced. Teachers and administrators measured skirt lengths to ensure they reached the knee. If your skirt was too short, you'd be sent home. Some schools even made girls kneel to confirm their skirts touched the floor. The rules were supposedly about modesty, but in reality, they enforced traditional gender roles. Boys had dress codes too, but far less restrictive, typically collared shirts and no jeans. Girls also faced rules about hair, makeup, jewelry, and shoes, with flat shoes often preferred over heels. As the 1960s progressed and the counterculture movement grew, these dress codes were increasingly challenged. By the late 1960s, some schools began to relax rules, but in the early to mid-1960s, they were just a fact of life. Teenage girls often found small ways to rebel, like rolling up skirt waistbands once in class. For girls of that era, strict dress codes were a daily frustration and a reminder of how tightly society tried to control their appearance and behavior. Fact 8. Sock hops were the social event of the week. Sock hops were one of the most popular social events for teenagers in the 1960s, named for the fact that students danced in their socks to avoid scuffing gym floors. These school dances usually happened on Friday or Saturday nights, and were the place to be if you wanted to be part of the social scene. The atmosphere was pure teenage culture. Gyms were decorated with streamers and balloons, a DJ or live band played the latest hits, and teens showed off their best dance moves, the twist, the mashed potato, or whatever craze was trending. Sock hops were also important for relationships. Going with a date signaled you were officially an item, and dancing with someone could express romantic interest. Social dynamics were complex, and missteps were quickly noticed. Chaperones, teachers, and parents watched from the edges of the gym, enforcing rules like the infamous 6-inch rule for slow dances. Despite supervision, sock hops allowed teens to feel free. You could dress up, hang out with friends, and maybe dance with your crush. Loud music, high energy, and a few carefree hours made them unforgettable. For teens of the 1960s, sock hops were more than dances. They were a defining part of adolescence, a snapshot of a simpler time when social life revolved around friends, music, and fun. Fact 9. Teenagers could buy cigarettes from vending machines. One of the most shocking differences between the 1960s and today was how easy it was for teenagers to buy cigarettes. Vending machines were everywhere. Restaurants, bowling alleys, gas stations, and even school cafeterias. And there were no age restrictions. A teen could insert a few quarters and walk away with a pack. No ID required. Smoking was widely accepted. Advertisements appeared on TV, in magazines, and on billboards, often portraying cigarettes as cool, sophisticated, and even healthy, with doctors sometimes endorsing certain brands. Many high schools had designated smoking areas for students old enough to smoke, usually 16 or 17. In schools without official areas, students would smoke in spots like behind the gym or in parking lots, often unnoticed by staff. Parents' attitudes were different too. While they might not have approved, it wasn't seen as the serious health risk it is today, especially since many parents smoked themselves. It wasn't until the late 1960s and into the 1970s that awareness of smoking's dangers grew, eventually leading to the strict regulations we have now. For teens in the 1960s, buying and smoking cigarettes was easy, socially acceptable, and just another part of everyday life. Fact 10. Going steady meant wearing someone's class ring. In the 1960s, going steady meant being in an exclusive relationship, and there was a specific ritual to make it official. The boy gave the girl his class ring. Wearing the ring signaled to everyone at school that they were a couple. Girls usually wore the ring on a chain around their neck, since it was too large for their fingers. The class ring was the era's equivalent of changing your relationship status on social media, a visible symbol of being taken and in a serious relationship. Going steady came with expectations. Couples were exclusive, spent most of their free time together, and often treated the relationship as their first real adult romance. Breaking up was just as ritualized. Returning the ring was a dramatic public acknowledgement that the relationship was over, with everyone soon knowing. Some serious couples went further, with the girl also wearing the boy's Letterman jacket. This was an even bigger declaration of commitment, signaling a deep, lasting connection. For teens in the 1960s, these rituals carried real weight. Class rings and Letterman jackets were treasured items, and trusting someone with them was a sign of deep affection. What seems quaint today was then a serious marker of social status and romance. Fact 11. Cruise nights were every weekend. Cruise nights were a weekly ritual for teenagers in the 1960s. If you had a car, or knew someone who did, Friday and Saturday nights meant driving up and down the main drag. The goal wasn't to get anywhere, but to be seen, show off your car, and hang out with friends. Cruising followed a set route, usually past key teenage hangouts like drive-ins, malt shops, and movie theaters. Teens drove slowly so people could admire their cars and waved or honked at friends in other vehicles. Cars were central to teenage identity, whether it was a brand new Mustang, a souped-up hot rod, or just a family station wagon. Being on cruise night meant being part of the scene. The nights were also social hubs. Friends met up, made plans, and occasionally got into minor trouble, racing from stoplight to stoplight, though police often patrolled the route. Social status mattered. Where you parked, who was in your car, and what you drove all counted. For many teens, cruise nights represented freedom, away from parents' eyes, with the open road ahead, friends by your side, and the latest hits from the Beach Boys or the Supremes on the radio. For a few hours, life was perfect. Fact 12. Record hops, weird dance parties. Without records. Record hops were a popular dance event for teenagers in the 1960s. Though the name was misleading, many didn't use records at all, featuring live bands or DJs playing the latest hits. The term came from earlier decades when vinyl records were standard, but the name stuck even as the format evolved. Usually held in school gyms, community centers, or local venues, record hops were less formal than sock hops. They were also more frequent, sometimes weekly, giving teens plenty of opportunities to socialize and dance. The dress code was casual, and the atmosphere relaxed. Record hops were where teens learned the newest dance crazes, from the pony to the Watusi, and dance contests often rewarded the best dancers. Beyond dancing, these events were key social gatherings. Friendships formed, relationships started, and the latest gossip spread. You could find out who was dating whom, who had broken up, and what parties were happening that weekend. For teenagers in the 1960s, record hops were a regular part of life, affordable, fun, and just lightly supervised by adults. They offered a space to be yourself, enjoy the music, and connect with friends. They were more than dances. They were a cornerstone of teenage culture. Fact 13. Curfew was enforced by everyone in the neighborhood. If you grew up in the 1960s, you probably remember having a curfew, and not just one set by your parents. In many neighborhoods, every adult felt responsible for making sure teenagers were home on time, and wouldn't hesitate to call your parents if you were out too late. This was the era of the community raising children. If you were supposed to be home by 10 o'clock and Mrs. Johnson saw you at 10:30, your parents would likely get a phone call. Curfews were taken seriously. Being late could mean being grounded, losing privileges, or not being allowed out the following weekend. Some towns even had official curfews enforced by police. Teens caught out after a certain hour could be picked up and brought home, or even to the station for parents to retrieve. These rules were meant to keep teenagers out of trouble, usually on weeknights. While neighborhood enforcement might seem intrusive today, it was just part of life in the 1960s. Everyone knew everyone. Privacy wasn't highly valued, and the upside was safer, more connected communities. Being out past curfew required strategy, back alleys, avoiding streetlights, and hoping no one was watching. It was a game with real consequences, shaping teenage life in a very different era. Fact 14. Malt shops were where everyone hung out. Malt shops were the social hub for teenagers in the 1960s. Serving ice cream, milkshakes, sodas, and light food, they were the go-to spot after school, on weekends, or anytime friends wanted to hang out. More than just a place to eat, malt shops were a cultural institution. Walking in meant entering a world made for teens. A jukebox playing the latest hits, booths along the walls for groups of friends, and a counter with swivel stools for sipping malted milkshakes. The menu featured hamburgers, hot dogs, fries, and specialty drinks like chocolate malts, strawberry shakes, and root beer floats, affordable enough for teens to visit regularly. Malt shops were also social arenas. Who sat where mattered, signaling friendships, crushes, and social status. Staff often knew regulars by name, and sometimes extended credit. Teenagers pooled money to share snacks, adding to the communal vibe. These shops were safe spaces where teens could be themselves with minimal adult supervision, making them perfect for meeting friends, making plans, and enjoying youth. For teens in the 1960s, countless hours spent at the local malt shop are fond memories, filled with sights, smells, and social moments that defined the era. Fact 15. Teenagers had to share. One family phone line in the 1960s. Most families had one phone, and it was usually mounted on the wall in the kitchen or hallway. This meant that everyone in the family had to share that single phone line. And for teenagers who wanted to talk to their friends for hours, this was a constant source of frustration when the phone rang. Anyone could answer it, and if the call was for you, someone would have to yell through the house to let you know there was no caller ID, so every ring was a mystery, and if you were expecting an important call, you'd hover near the phone, hoping to grab it before anyone else did. Phone conversations in the 1960s also weren't private since the phone was in a common area. Everyone could hear what you were saying. Parents would often tell their teenagers to get off the phone because they were expecting a call, or because someone else needed to use it. The phone cord, which was usually coiled and could stretch only so far, limited how far you could move for a bit of privacy. Some lucky families had extra long phone cords that allowed you to stretch the phone into another room, or even into a closet for a more private conversation. But even then, you were constantly aware that your time was limited, and that someone might need. The phone teenagers in the 1960s spent a lot of time talking on the phone. Despite these limitations, phone conversations with friends or with a boyfriend or girlfriend were an important part of social life. You'd talk about what happened at school, make plans for the weekend, or just talk about nothing. In particular, parents often complained about how much time teenagers spent on the phone and how it tied up the line. There were constant battles over phone usage, and teenagers had to develop strategies for maximizing their phone time without angering their parents too much. The shared family phone line meant that privacy was scarce, and if you wanted to have a truly private conversation, you had to find other ways to do it, like passing notes at school or talking in person. The telephone was both a blessing and a curse for 1960s teenagers. Fact 16. Making out at Inspiration. Point was a rite of passage. Almost every town in America during the 1960s had a spot known as Inspiration Point, or Lover's Lane, or some other similar name. These were secluded areas, usually on a hill or overlooking water, where couples would go to park and make out inspiration. The point was a rite of passage for teenagers, and going there meant you were officially in a serious relationship. The appeal of Inspiration Point was obvious. It offered privacy away from prying parental eyes, but was still relatively safe because other couples were usually there too. On any given weekend night, you'd find dozens of cars parked at Inspiration Point with windows fogged up and radios playing softly. There was something romantic about Inspiration. Point 2, the view was usually beautiful, whether it was city lights spread out below or the moon reflecting on water. And for teenagers experiencing their first real relationships, these spots felt special and almost magical. Of course, parents knew exactly what went on at Inspiration Point, which is why there were constant warnings about not staying out too late and not going there at all. If you were a girl, your father probably told you that nothing good happened at Inspiration Point, and if you were a boy, well, you knew exactly why you wanted to go there. Police would occasionally patrol Inspiration Point areas and would shine their flashlights into cars to make sure nothing too serious was happening. This was known as getting spotlighted, and it was embarrassing, but usually the police would just move you along without any real consequences. Inspiration Point was also the setting for countless teenage rumors about what had happened there, who had been caught by the police, which couples had been seen there, and what had transpired. These stories circulated through schools and added to the mystique of the place. If you were a teenager, in the 1960s you probably went to Inspiration Point at least once, and you probably have memories of those nights that still make you smile. The combination of romance, rebellion, and the thrill of being somewhere you weren't supposed to be made Inspiration Point an essential part of the 1960s teenage experience. Fact 17. Car clubs were serious business for teenagers. In the 1960s, especially boys' car clubs were a big deal. These weren't just casual groups of friends who liked cars. They were organized clubs with rules, membership requirements, and regular meetings. Car clubs would work on their vehicles together, go to races and cruise together. As a pack, joining a car club meant you were part of something bigger than yourself. You had a group identity, and you could show off your car alongside others who shared your passion. Clubs would often have matching jackets or decals that identified them as members, and seeing a group of club cars cruising together was an impressive sight. Car clubs also served a social function. They organized events like car shows, drag races, and cruise nights. They'd sometimes have rivalries with other car clubs, though these were usually friendly competitions rather than serious conflicts. The goal was to have the coolest cars, the best drivers, and the most respect. Membership in a car club wasn't automatic either. You usually had to be invited or go through some kind of initiation process. Your car had to meet certain standards too. If you rolled up in a beat-up station wagon, you probably weren't getting into the club that focused on hot rods. Some car clubs were focused on specific types of vehicles. Hot rod clubs, custom car clubs, Volkswagen clubs, and so on. Others were more general and accepted any car as long as it was cool enough, and the owner was committed to the club's values. Car club meetings were serious affairs. Two members would discuss upcoming events, plan modifications to their vehicles, and sometimes even take votes on club matters. There were officers, presidents, vice presidents, and treasurers. Just like any other organization, for teenagers who were passionate about cars. Being in a club was one of the highlights of their high school years. It gave them a sense of belonging, a way to express themselves, and something to work toward. If you were part of a car club in the 1960s, you probably still have your club jacket tucked away somewhere as a reminder of those days. Fact 18. Homecoming. Mums were gigantic corsages. If you went to high school in Texas or some other southern states during the 1960s, you'll definitely remember homecoming mums. These weren't the small, delicate corsages you might imagine they were. Enormous, elaborate creations that got bigger and more outrageous every year. A homecoming mum started with a large chrysanthemum flower, usually in the school colors, and then would be decorated with ribbons, streamers, bells, trinkets, and anything else you could think of. By the mid to late 1960s, some mums were so large that girls could barely carry them, and they'd drag on the ground. Boys would give mums to their dates or girlfriends before the homecoming game, and the size and elaborateness of the mum was a statement about the relationship. The more elaborate the mum, the more serious the relationship. At least that's how many teenagers interpreted it. Wearing your homecoming mum to school on the day of the big game was a point of pride. Girls would pin these massive creations to their shirts and walk around all day, showing them off. The hallways would be filled with the sound of bells jingling and the sight of ribbons flowing behind students as they walked. The tradition of homecoming, mums became increasingly competitive over the years, with each graduating class trying to outdo the previous one. What started as a simple flower corsage evolved into elaborate displays that could cost quite a bit of money if you didn't get a mum for homecoming. It could be embarrassing, and there was definitely social pressure around the whole tradition. Girls without mums would feel left out, and boys felt pressure to provide impressive mums to show their affection. Looking back, the whole homecoming mum tradition seems a bit excessive, but for teenagers in the 1960s, it was just part of the high school experience, especially in certain parts of the country. These oversized corsages represented school spirit, romance, and the competitive nature of teenage social life. Fact 19. Basement parties were unsupervised. Heaven. If you were lucky enough to have a finished basement in the 1960s, your house was probably the place where everyone wanted to hang out. Basement parties were a staple of teenage social life, and they offered something precious unsupervised time with your friends' parents. In the 1960s, had a different attitude towards supervision than parents do today. If you were having friends over to the basement, your parents might check in occasionally, but mostly they'd stay upstairs and let you do your thing. As long as the music wasn't too loud and nobody was causing trouble, you were left alone. Basements were perfect for parties because they were separated from the rest of the house. You could play music, loudly turn the lights down low, and feel like you had your own private space. Some families would even set up their basements like mini recreation rooms with a record player, a small refrigerator, and maybe a television basement. Parties were where a lot of firsts happened. First, slow dance, first kiss, first time really feeling independent from your parents. The atmosphere was relaxed and fun. And because you were technically at home, parents assumed you couldn't get into too much trouble. Some basement parties would have themes, or would be organized around events like listening to a new album that had just been released, or watching a special television program. Other times they were just spontaneous gatherings that happened when word got out that someone's parents were going to be upstairs all evening. Snacks at basement parties usually consisted of whatever you could raid from your parents' kitchen: potato chips, soda, maybe some cookies. If you were lucky, some industrious teenagers would make popcorn or heat up frozen pizzas. The freedom of basement parties made them incredibly popular, and if you hosted one, you'd instantly boost your social status. Your house would become the place to be, and everyone would want to be invited to the next one. If you were a teenager in the 1960s, you probably have vivid memories of basement parties, the dim lighting, the music playing on the record player, and the feeling of being part of something special. Those unsupervised hours in someone's basement represented a kind of freedom that seems almost unimaginable to teenagers today, who grow up with much more parental oversight and supervision. Fact 20: summer jobs were easy to get and actually paid. Well, one of the most significant differences between being a teenager in the 1960s and being one today was how easy it was to get a summer job. Teenagers could walk into almost any local business, fill out a simple application, and start working within days. No extensive resume, no multiple interviews, no unpaid internships. Summer jobs were everywhere. You could work at the local grocery store as a bag boy or cashier. You could get a job at the gas station, pumping gas and checking oil. You could work at the movie theater, scooping popcorn or tearing tickets, or you could get a job at a restaurant bussing tables or working as a fry cook. What made these jobs even better was that they actually paid decent money. Minimum wage in the mid-1960s was around $1.25 per hour, which doesn't sound like much but had real purchasing power. A teenager working full-time during the summer could earn enough money to buy a used car, save for college, or have plenty of spending money for the school year. Employers were also much more willing to hire teenagers and train them on the job. You didn't need previous experience for most positions, because businesses expected to teach you what you needed to know. The work ethic and reliability were more important than having a polished resume. Many teenagers worked the same summer job for multiple years, building relationships with their employers and their coworkers. These jobs taught responsibility, time management, and the value of earning your own money. They were an important part of growing up and learning to be independent. Some teenagers even worked during the school year, taking on part-time jobs after school or on weekends. Parents generally encouraged this, as long as grades didn't suffer, because having a job was seen as building character and teaching important life skills. The money teenagers earned from these jobs was theirs to spend as they wanted. Some saved diligently for big purchases like cars or for college. Others spent it on clothes, records, concerts, and dates. But either way, having your own money meant having independence and freedom. If you were a teenager in the 1960s, you probably had at least one summer job, and you probably remember the sense of accomplishment that came with earning your first paycheck. Those jobs might have been simple, and the work might not have been glamorous, but they were accessible, they paid fairly, and they gave teenagers a taste of adult responsibility. The ease of finding work and the decent pay meant that teenagers in the 1960s had more economic independence than many teenagers today. They could afford to buy things they wanted without relying entirely on their parents, and they could learn the value of work in a way that shaped their adult attitudes toward employment and money. Looking back at these 20 weird facts about 1960s teenagers, it's clear that teenage life was vastly different from what young people experience today. From the strange fads like phone booth stuffing and goldfish swallowing, to the social rituals like wearing class rings and going to sock hops. The 1960s teenage experience was unique. Some of these facts seem charming and innocent, like hanging out at the malt shop or going to record hops. Others, like panty raids and the ease of buying cigarettes from vending machines, seem shocking and completely unacceptable by modern standards. But all of them together paint a picture of a time when teenagers were carving out their own identity and culture. The 1960s was a decade of transition for teenagers. At the beginning of the decade, they were still following many of the rules and conventions of the 1950s. But by the end of the decade, everything had changed. The counterculture movement had taken hold, and the teenage experience looked completely different. If you were a teenager during this era, You lived through an incredible time of change, and you probably participated in at least some of these activities that now seem so strange and foreign. You made mixtapes by recording off the radio. You went to drive-in movies. You cruised Main Street on Saturday nights. And you navigated the complex social world of high school with its dress codes and dating rituals. These experiences shaped who you became and gave you memories that have lasted a lifetime. And even though some of these facts might seem weird to younger generations who didn't grow up during this time, they were just normal, everyday life for you. They were the things that made the 1960s special, and they were part of what it meant to be a teenager during that remarkable decade. So, whether you remember submarine races or sock hops, homecoming mums, or basement parties, these weird facts are really just pieces of history that remind us how much things have changed and how different teenage life once was. The 1960s teenagers had their own unique culture, their own language, and their own way of doing things. And while some of it seems strange now, it was all part of growing up during one of the most interesting decades in American history.